One of the most exciting parts about my Pigskins and Pigtails screen printer starter press is being able to do 2, 3, 4, or an unlimited number of colors, all using this compact press. But you're probably wondering how to set that up. Hey, it's Jennifer with Pigskins and Pigtails. If you follow me, you know I'm obsessed with screen printing using vinyl. I love this method because it's so easy to set up. I can go from my vinyl cutter straight to my screen printing frame without messing with chemicals or waiting for my screen to dry. In this video, I'm going to share 3 ways to set up a multicolored design on this screen printing press using vinyl. You can use these same alignment techniques with traditional screen printing methods as well. This first method will look familiar if you've purchased my deluxe Speedball screen printing kit or taken one of my online courses. This is how I started screen printing multicolor designs before having a screen printing press. This process starts in the program you use to cut your vinyl. I'm in Leonardo's Design Studio, but you can do the same in Cricut Design Space or other programs. I have my design and I'm going to start by scaling this down to the size I want it to print on my shirts. I usually go about 10 inches wide for adult shirts. Next, we're going to add the registration boxes around the design. I use a square, but this could be any shape. And it doesn't have to be big, so I'm going to scale this down. And for more accurate alignment, it's helpful to have more than one box. So let's put one in each corner of the design. You want to place these above and below the design with a little space in between. Now highlight the entire design and the 4 boxes, copy and paste or duplicate it. This is going to be a 3-color design, so I need 3 copies of this logo. Next, we're going to separate the colors. This first one is going to be the red ink, so I'm going to delete out the fire and the navy words. Be careful as you do this. You don't want any of the pieces of the design or the registration boxes to move. That would mess up your alignment. Now highlight the red part of the design and the 4 boxes and click the weld icon. In Cricut Design Space, this would be the attach button. And this will make sure the design and the boxes stay in place. The next one is going to be the fire, which is actually going to be a blend of yellow and red ink. Delete out the red and navy parts of the design, and then weld this together with the 4 boxes. The last one is going to be the navy ink, so delete out the red and fire parts of the design, and again, weld or attach these together. We are ready to send the design. The next step in Leonardo allows you to adjust the layout of these 3 pieces. First, make sure you have the mirror option checked so that it flips the design like this. Then let's add a weeding box around each piece. The shortcut for this is the X key. If you're using Cricut Design Space, you'll just want to add a box around your design. We are ready to cut this. After you weed the design, it will look like this. The 3 vinyl pieces, 1 for each color. And I'm applying transfer tape to each one of them. After the transfer tape, you need to decide which layer you want to start with. I recommend choosing the layer that has the top piece of the design, or the part that's going to be closest to the collar of your shirt. In my case, I'm going to start with the red layer. So I'm peeling the backing paper off, leaving the vinyl sticky side up. Now we can align this on the screen printing press. I've got palette adhesive on my press so the palette is sticky. I like to use a scrap piece of fabric, or you could use the back of an old t-shirt for this process. You'll see why in a minute. With that stuck to the palette, I like to fold my vinyl to make a crease at the top and bottom center points of the design. I usually have a center line drawn down my palette, which I don't have here, so I'm just going to eyeball the center of the palette and place the vinyl sticky side up. I also want to make sure my design is 2 to 3 inches from the end of the palette. The shirt collar is going to be right at the edge of my palette, so if you want the design to start 2 inches down from your collar, make sure that's where the top of your design hits. This is why we chose the layer that has the top most part of our design to start with. Once the design is in the right spot, add your frame and lower it down to grab the vinyl. Now you can take the screen off and press the vinyl on and remove the transfer tape. If you have any open areas of screen around your vinyl like I do, cover those with painter's tape so the ink doesn't go through here. Now the screen can go back in the clamp. I'm grabbing the red ink since that's the color of this first screen. And I'm gonna just use a little bit of ink above the registration box. I'm using a small squeegee for this and printing just the little box. Repeat that for all 4 boxes. Now we can release the clamp on this press using the red toggle handles. This removes the screen and clamp together so that this first screen will remain in the right spot. Let's dry this red ink quickly with a heat gun, just for a few seconds each. It doesn't take long with these little spots. Now grab another piece of vinyl. It doesn't really matter which one. With the vinyl sticky side up, line up the boxes cut out of the vinyl with the 4 boxes printed on the fabric. Move your vinyl around until it's in the right spot. Grab your second clamp and screen and lower the screen down to grab the vinyl. Use the quick release to remove the screen so that it's a little easier to take the transfer tape off. Let's fine-tune this alignment now that we can see through the vinyl a little bit better. You can loosen the knobs so that your screen can be moved around until it's in the right spot, matching up with the 4 red boxes. Once it's perfectly in place, tighten those knobs as tightly as you can. After you tighten the knobs, check again to make sure it's still in the right spot. This screen is all lined up, so remove it with the quick release red handles and set it aside. We're going to repeat this process with the final color, placing the vinyl sticky side up and moving it around until it's in the right spot. Grab the vinyl with your screen. Remove the transfer tape. And fine-tune the alignment. And don't forget to add the painter's tape. Now all 3 screens are locked into their alignment. We can cover up the boxes with tape because on our shirts we don't want to print these boxes. Make sure you cover up the boxes on all 3 screens. With the screens aligned, you can now print your first color. Remove it with the quick release toggles and clamp in your next color. You'll notice that I didn't dry the red ink. After a little testing, I figured out that my blue squeegee wasn't going over the red ink, so drying it didn't really make a difference. Before I swap out for the final screen, I did dry the ink. When your squeegee goes over these areas, you don't want the ink transferring to the back of your screen and potentially pulling off your vinyl. The final screen is a blend of 2 colors and it turned out perfectly aligned. Now we can repeat this with the next shirt, printing and swapping out the screens to print one after another. I ended up printing 60 shirts with this setup. And from the first shirt to the very last one, they were all aligned perfectly. This second method is a great option if you have a home printer and you're savvy when it comes to printing SVGs. Let me explain the steps to this process and you can see if this one sounds easier for you. In your vinyl cutting software, place your SVG file. If your design needs to be scaled up or down to the size you want it to print, make that adjustment now. Then duplicate the design to make as many copies as there are colors in your design. For this 2-color design, I've got 2 copies of the design. Notice that we didn't use the registration boxes. I'm going to remove the yellow from this one, and then remove the blue pieces from this one. Now we can send the design to cut. Here's where you'll add the weeding boxes. If you're using Cricut Design Space, you'll do this in the previous step by adding a box around the design and then attaching that to your design. While these 2 pieces cut, The next step is to print out a hard copy of your entire design. I designed my SVG files in Illustrator, so I have my design open here. You can use other programs to do this as well. But the first step is that we need our design to be scaled to the exact same size as it was when you cut the vinyl. If your design isn't the same size, adjust it here. Now you should be able to print it from Illustrator. But my network printer doesn't like printing from Illustrator for some reason, so I have to take one more step, which is to copy it over to Photoshop. In Photoshop, I have a legal size document open, and I'm going to paste the design from Illustrator. I don't want to change the scale or size of this, so just double click to drop it into Photoshop. My design is a little too wide to fit on a legal size paper, but that's okay. I'm going to print it, making sure it's printing the actual size, even though it's going to cut off just a tad. If you have a big design and it cuts off a good bit, that's okay. As long as we have a good piece of the design that shows both colors, we'll be able to line it up just fine. So here's what my printout looks like. I'm going to take and fold that in half so I can see the center point and line that up with the center of my palette. Again, having a center line drawn down your palette here will be helpful in lining this up. This design is pretty tall, so I'm going to align it a little closer to the edge of my palette than I normally would. I'll explain this more when we load our shirt. Carefully press the paper into your tack so it holds the paper. This is important. You don't want the template to move. With your vinyl weeded and your transfer tape applied, remove the backing paper from one of the pieces. Place it sticky side up over your design. Now we can use the printed template to line up the vinyl. Move the vinyl around until it's lined up as closely as possible. It's a little hard to see through the transfer tape, so just get as close as you can. Then lower the screen down to grab that vinyl. Remove the transfer tape. And place the screen back in the clamp with the knobs loose. Move your screen around until the vinyl cutout lines up perfectly with the printed copy. Remember, I didn't print the full width of the design, but you can just use this middle part to get it lined up. Tighten the knobs once you have it in the right spot, and you can remove the screen and clamp using the quick release toggle. Now let's do the same to line up the yellow screen. Move your vinyl design around until it lines up with the yellow pieces. Once you have it in the right spot and your knobs are tightened all the way, you can remove the printed template. When I load my shirt, remember how I said my design was a little closer to the edge than my typical 2 to 3 inches? To adjust for this, I'm going to pull the shirt towards me a little bit more, making sure that I have about 3 inches between the top edge of my design and the collar. For this particular design, it doesn't matter which color I start with because my colors do not overlap. If your colors overlap, you'll want to start with the lighter colors first. The beauty of this press is that you can continue to swap out screens to make as many of these shirts as you'd like. Each design is going to be lined up perfectly. This final technique for lining up multicolored designs on your press is for Cricut users. If the previous method doesn't work for you because you don't have a home printer, or maybe you aren't sure how to get it to print the right size, this method can be done using just Cricut Design Space. I've got my design uploaded and sized how I want it to print. This is going to be a 5-color design, but instead of making 5 copies, I'm going to duplicate this until I have 6 designs. Spread these out and let's start removing colors. For this first one, I'm going to remove everything but the blue. I'm actually hiding these layers by toggling the eye icon, but you could also delete them. You might need to expand the groupings so that you can find each piece. For the next one, I'll remove all but the pink. And then all but the orange from this one. Then let's remove all but the word screen from this one. And then for the 5th color, all but purple. Now with this last duplicated design, click on it and go to the operation drop-down. Change that to pin. Now around each of these designs, we want to add a rectangle. This is going to make it easier to weed. Size this around each piece of the design, and I'm actually going to change the color just so it's a little bit easier to see, and send this layer to the back. Now you can make sure that your design fits inside the rectangle. Repeat this for all of the colors. Then select the box and that piece of the design and click Attach so it cuts together. And notice it turns each of them gray as you do this. This is perfect because these small pieces can all cut on the same sheet of vinyl. The vinyl color doesn't matter because we're just using them as stencils for our screen printing. You also need to highlight this and click Attach so the letters stay in place. Now we can click Make. You see the draw layer comes up first. And then if you click on the others, you'll see these are our vinyl cuts, and we want to make sure these are mirrored. Let's go back to the draw layer and click Continue. And for this material, I'm going to choose cardstock and follow the prompts to load the cardstock on my mat and insert the Cricut pen. Now the machine will draw out your design. Then you can cut the vinyl pieces next. I have trimmed the cardstock down and we can place this on the palette. You'll notice that my words are turned the other direction this time because I'm printing tote bags. You can see how the tote bag is going to be loaded differently than a shirt. I'm making a mental note that when I line up the top of the bag with the top piece of the palette, that will print my design in the spot that I want it to print. So just like we did in the other methods, you can take your vinyl sticky side up and align it to this template. You just want to get it lined up as closely as you can and then drop your screen down to grab the vinyl. With the transfer tape removed, you can now see through the vinyl much easier to do your fine-tune alignment. Move the screen around until it lines up with the pin lines. And tighten the clamps to hold the screen in place. Do the same process for each of the 5 colors, doing a closer alignment before securing the screen into the clamps. With all 5 screens lined up and secured into their clamps, we're ready to print. After each color, use a heat gun to dry the ink. You can see how the design lines up perfectly without any adjustments. Just swap out the screens, clamping them into place. And pull the squeegee. It's just that easy to screen print multiple bags or shirts using my Pigskins and Pigtails starter press. This project is one that I wouldn't have been able to do with my 4-color press. Not only did it take up so much more space, but it was limited to 4 colors. With this press, you can print 5, 6, or even more colors by adding a screen and clamp for each color. Plus, this can be hung on the wall or moved into a closet when you're done. Check out the resources I have linked below and subscribe to my channel for more screen printing with vinyl tips and tricks. If you found this video helpful, here's another video to watch next.